Hello, people of Earth and beyond! A warm welcome to all of my friends out there from the other place and all my Trafalmadorian friends. My name is Shannon, and today I am doing a review of Bartimaeus, the Golem's Eye by Jonathan Stroud. This is the second book in the Bartimaeus Trilogy, and I've already done a review on the first book, The Amulet of Samarkand, so you can go check that out. And if you've already seen that video, you know that I split it into a non-spoiler and spoiler section and then broke that down further into 4 key components, which were the themes, the writing, the magic and world building, and the characters. And I talked about each of those. In the non-spoiler section, I just kind of gave a vague overview and then went more in depth with everything in the spoiler section. And that's probably going to be how I structure all of my videos, but for today, I'm actually going to skip the non-spoiler section because a lot of what I would have to say is the same as it was for the last video that I did. So, I'm just gonna go right in depth with the Golem's Eye. So, if you don't want spoilers, sorry, this video is not for you. If you're watching, I'm kind of assuming you've already read at least the first book in this series, and that maybe you're interested and don't care about spoilers in this one, or that you've already read it. The Golem's Eye takes place 2 years after the events of the Amulet of Samarkand. Nathaniel works in the government in the Department of Internal Affairs, and it's his job to quell the resistance. And honestly, he's not having a ton of luck, and then there are a bunch of random attacks that are not by the resistance, even though everyone thinks they are, and Nathaniel eventually finds out, with Bartimaeus' help, that they are caused by a golem, and the plot kind of takes off from there. Before I break this down any further, I want to give just my general thoughts on this book. I have to admit that this is my least favorite in the Bartimaeus Trilogy, and that's not to say I don't like it. I always love Jonathan Stroud's writing style, I love the story in general, I love the characters. There were just some things that I noticed in this book that I didn't like quite so much. I just didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed the first and the third. But it is still part of one of my favorite series of all time. So let's just dive in. I'm not going to cover the magic and the world building because I already covered that in the last video and it's still the same. So we're going to start with the writing. And this is where I actually had some problems, and I really hate to say that, because Jonathan Stroud is one of my favorite authors, and this is one of my favorite series, so it's really frustrating when I find writing things that I don't like in it. But, alas, I did. So, there's a lot going on in this book. There's a golem, there is the resistance, there is a renegade Afrit. Afri? I think it's actually pronounced Afri. There's Bartimaeus and Nathaniel running around trying to solve everything. And you would think that the main conflict would be finding the master of the golem, but I honestly think the main conflict is with the resistance. There are times when the hunt for the golem feels like a side quest, especially with Nathaniel not finding out anything useful when he's in Prague. I mean, sure, he finds the magician who actually created the manuscript, but he can't pin down who he was creating the manuscript for. But it's not a dropped plot thread, or really an unnecessary one, because it prompts Nathaniel to summon Bartimaeus, and it forces Kitty to choose whether or not to save Nathaniel. And so Jonathan Stroud does a good job of making it come full circle. It's just kind of strange to me that, you know, it's called The Golem's Eye, and a lot of the time it feels like the story's not particularly focused on that, but it's not too bad. Like, everything's wrapped up, so I don't mind so much that it feels like a side quest. The Golem's Eye puts a lot of things in motion. There's a lot of foreshadowing and a lot of setting up for Ptolemy's Gate, and I don't think the plot of this book suffers from that. It's not like the preparation for the next book overshadows the events of this one, but there's just a lot to keep up with. It switches perspectives a lot. Each character's kind of doing their own thing, going different places, and it's a lot to keep up with. It's well done for the most part, but it's just a lot to handle. I think overall the pacing was good. It was kind of hard for me to tell because I've been really busy the past week and haven't had a lot of time to read, so that makes the book seem like it went a lot slower, and that is my mistake. So I'm not going to ding for the pacing at all, because it was really hard for me to tell, and I apologize that I can't really analyze that better. There are some parts when the story slows down a lot because we're getting background information. I said that in my last video too. It's not really bad, it just slows, there's not a whole lot of action. The parts about Kitty's backstory in particular felt a little information dumpy, if I'm honest. I also noticed that there were some paragraphs that just did not flow. Like, when we're getting Kitty's backstory, there's a random paragraph, not really random, it's relevant, but it's a paragraph that's just kind of sandwiched in the middle about her physical appearance. And don't get me wrong, I want to know what Kitty looks like, I want to visualize my characters, but it just felt a little jerky the way it was put in there. And there's another example when they're raiding Gladstone's tomb. There's a random paragraph talking about the cobwebs that are in the catacombs that they're going through, and Mr. Pennyfeather has to knock them out of the way. And it's not irrelevant information, it's description, but it just felt like it was a little stuck in there, and I didn't like that so much. My other issue is with the structure, and this one is particularly frustrating because I don't know how you would fix it and still get the whole story. Other than the flashback to Prague in the very beginning, it takes a long time to get to Bartimaeus' point of view. The prologue ends on page 17. We don't see Bartimaeus again until page 110. It takes 93 pages to get back to our main protagonist. I like Kitty, I like Nathaniel, I want to know what's going on in their lives, but I'm really here for Bartimaeus. I love him and his sassiness and the way he narrates, and so I just always want to get back to him. I mean, okay, in a way, I like how Jonathan Stroud did this, like, holding off on introducing Bartimaeus, because for the most part, this arc of the series isn't really about Bartimaeus. It's from the human's perspective because everything that's going on is with the resistance and Nathaniel's career, and it's all human politics and human problems related. And not introducing Bartimaeus for a long time emphasizes that, and I get it. Bartimaeus is just a spectator, really, although he happens to change Vidi's view about spirits. Kinda, sorta. He makes her question them. I get all of that, but I love Bartimaeus' sassiness, and I'm always impatient to get to his chapters. It's so much fun reading from his perspective. So that's really a personal preference thing. It's not really a problem with the book. It's just, I guess in a way it keeps me turning the pages thinking, where is Bartimaeus? I want him! One last criticism about the writing. I'm not sure the last chapter was really necessary. Yes, it's nice to know what happened to Kitty and Jacob, but I feel like it could have been explained in book 3. I don't know. I really think it would have been nice to end with Bartimaeus and Nathaniel, because I still see them as the main protagonists of the story. I know all that seemed really negative, but again, I'd like to reiterate, I love Jonathan Stroud's writing style. His descriptions just come alive, and he is one of my favorite authors. I love his characters, I love his world, I love the whole idea of this series, and I just think there were some parts that needed to be edited, re-looked at, something like that. I don't know. But I still love his writing in general. Just want to make that clear, because I really hate bashing one of my favorite authors. One of my categories in my last video was themes, specifically good versus evil or morality, and our perception of it. I'm not going to go super deep with this round because I've already said a lot of it. The themes are still all there. If you're curious, you can go watch my first video. I would just like to add one layer to what I said last time. The Resistance adds something to the whole morality thing. We're supposed to see demons as bad and humans as good, only in this series, it's flipped. We sympathize with the spirits and despise the magicians. But then we're supposed to ask, are all humans evil? And of course, the answer is no. There are people like Kitty. But take a look at the actual Resistance. We think they're doing some good, right? I mean, they're trying to take down an oppressive government. But they are thieves. And stealing is usually considered immoral. And members like Fred, Stanley, and Martin are not opposed to killing, or destruction of property, which is also generally frowned upon. My point is that there is no good guy in this series. We root for different people at different times, sure. I mean, we'd rather Nathaniel succeed than Duval, because Duval's like a flat-out villain, and we generally root for the Resistance. But I'm not sure you can consider anyone a hero, at least not in the traditional sense. I'm talking King Arthur, knight in shining armor, always good. That doesn't exist in this book. It doesn't exist in real life. Not even Bartimaeus is a good guy. Bartimaeus actually flat out states that he doesn't have a conscience in this book. Now, I take this with a grain of salt, because although he may not be able to choose what his master commands him to do, he can still recognize when something is wrong. He just doesn't have free will. And if he were actually wicked, he would have killed Kitty when he was prompted, but not obligated to do so, or other stuff like that. In terms of moral superiority, Kitty has everyone beat. But even she's not perfect. Basically, there is no clear cut between good and evil. Humans are complicated creatures. So are Jinn. Morality is very complicated. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, characters. I'm not going to talk about all of them because that would take forever, and some of them are not even worth talking about. Jonathan Stroud does a really good job of picking and choosing who to highlight and who to flesh out, but a lot of them are kind of flat characters, and that's okay because they don't really have a super important role in the story, they're just kind of there. But that leads me to our villain. Duval is flat. No other way to say it. But, oddly enough, I don't really think that's a bad thing. He's a standard villain, but shockingly, he's not at the center of the story. Like, anytime you have a fantasy series with good versus bad, you know, the conflict is always the hero versus the villain, but that's not even really what the story is about. Like, yes, Nathaniel's trying to figure out who's controlling the Golem, but it's, again, the Golem feels like a side quest, and that's not really the crux of this story. Anyway, Duval is nothing more than a greedy magician, but he doesn't really need to be anything else because the story's not about him. Lovelace was a very personal villain to Nathaniel, but Duval is just an instigator, and he doesn't really need much more motivation than power because that's what all of the magicians are after. So, this is one case where your villain can be flat and it works. We don't have to know a lot about him. We despise him anyway. Before I talk about the main three characters, I want to talk about Queasel. I am disappointed! Not in Queasel, per se, but in her role in the story. I wanted her to be more important. Let me just back up a second here. Before I read this series, my sister spent years trying to convince me to read it. And she showed me some fan art of Queasel one time, and she was like, I love Queasel. I gave her a pillow pet one time as a present, and she named it Queasel. She loves Queasel. And so I went into this thinking, oh, Queasel is going to be a big character that I'm gonna love. And no, I do love her. I love her a lot. But a friend of mine once put it in the best way that I can explain it. In old animated movies, the background and the foreground were done separately, like the background was painted and then the foreground was animated, cartoon style. So if there was something in the background that was going to move and be a part of the story, it looked slightly different. That's what I thought Jonathan Stroud was doing. I thought he was drawing attention to Queasel because he was going to make her a key component of the story. I love Queasel. I love the snatching glimpses we get of her, and she died! I'm very disappointed that we don't get more time with her, because she's amazing. However, despite my disappointment, I do think that Queasel is important. Not to the plot so much, though it pains me to say that, because I wanted her to be. She is very important to Bartimaeus. Not just in that he actually cares about her, but she's important to his character in a way. Their interactions show a different side of him. They show him actually caring about someone other than himself. And yes, I've read Ptolemy's Gate. I know that we are going to get more of that. But hush, hush, you people who have read the entire series already. The interactions between Queasel and Bartimaeus show a softer side to Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus tends to not like any other djinn he comes in contact with in the books. And, of course, he generally hates humans. But he shows affection for Queasel, meaning he's capable of actually bonding with another living being. And so, I appreciate her role in that sense. I just wish she also had a role with, I don't know, the Golem and everything. I wish we had more time with her, because she's amazing. Next up, Kitty. Kitty is great. Kitty is amazing. Strong, independent female character and not overdone. Well written, three-dimensional, and her views really make sense based on what she's been taught. Like, the fact that she thinks all demons are wicked. That's just what she's been taught by her society. And she starts to question her way of thinking based on what Bartimaeus tells her. And she realizes the mistakes she's been making for the past 3 years. And there is absolutely nothing bad to say about Kitty as a character. Like, we're seeing her development in the first book. We actually spend any time with her. I love her. I love her. She's amazing. Awesome. Well done. Nathaniel. Oh, I'm so sorry. John Mandrake. Nathaniel doesn't exist anymore. Nathaniel is extremely unlikable in this book, which is a good thing. It's character development. I think Jonathan Stroud does a really good job of showing him becoming like the other magicians and seizing power, being worried about his position. He's definitely more conniving in this book than he was in the last one, but he still does have a small semblance of righteousness. Like, he frees the Czech spies, he makes good on his promise to Kafka. I can't really think of any other examples where he actually shows some moral goodness. but it's there, barely, and it makes me root for him a little bit. At least, I don't know. It's hard when you're reading from someone's perspective to not root for them, so in a way I'm glad that he got Gladstone's staff and found who was controlling the golem and everything and got more power in the government, even if it means he's becoming more like the other magicians, and yeah. But I think there's a very interesting balance of villain and hero in him, even if at this point he's kind of a jerk. And finally, Bartimaeus. I just have to say it again. Bartimaeus is my one true love. He is a very layered and complex character if you read between the lines. He's not... He says things, but then shows other things. He doesn't tell you everything, but he shows you everything, and I love that. I love his sass and his snarkiness. Those are all of my thoughts on Bartimaeus the Golem's Eye. Leave a comment down below telling me what your thoughts are. At some point I will be doing a review of Ptolemy's Gate, but I'm reading something else right now, so I don't know exactly when that will be. Hopefully it'll be soon. And I'll do reviews on other series as well. So thank you so much for watching.